What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Carter Wilson. We're talking about his book, Tell Me What You Did. That book is available now. Third time talking to Carter. I'm a sucker for thriller and suspense, and he does it well. So any title that I've read of his, I've greatly enjoyed. So I'm always going to recommend his book to any readers and listeners. And so it was really cool to talk to him about this experience and how he approached this book versus his other titles and all that good stuff. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Without further ado, here is Carter. So today we've got Carter Wilson. We're talking about Tell Me What You Did. That book is available now. Carter, thank you so much for joining me today. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you again. I think this
You
is
as
our
well,
third time
Megan.
chatting.
Yeah,
I think only 2 more times and you get a jacket or something like that.
like an
We'll
L.
figure it out. But yeah, we're talking about Tell Me What You Did. I just finished this. We'll get into it, but I feel like it was a bit darker than what I expected, and I really enjoy reading your work, and you're very good at suspense. But for me, I was like, "Okay, you." It seemed like you took it up a notch. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper into that.
Great. I'm excited to hear what questions you have.
Yeah. So to get started, can you give like a brief summary so that people can follow along with the conversation?
Yeah, so tell me what you did. Tells the story of 30-year-old Poe Webb, who is the host of a very popular true crime podcast called Tell Me What You Did. And the conceit of the podcast is that people can call in and they can anonymously confess to crimes. Why anyone would do this, I have no idea. But it's become a very popular podcast. It culminates very early on when she gets a caller who's familiar in a very vague, creepy way. And his confession is that he murdered Poe's mother. Now, Poe knows that her mother was murdered. In fact, Poe actually witnessed her mother's brutal murder when Poe was only 13. But she knows this can't be the guy because Poe spent 8 years tracking down this guy and murdering him. And this is no spoiler alert. This is all on the back cover. So it just becomes this question of who is this guy? How does he know so much about her? And if he is who he claims to be, who did Poe kill? That's it in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
in a nutshell. And there's layers, and I thought there was a lot of cool stuff I thought you did that was new that we could talk about as well. If people don't know you by now, I know you by now for the most part. I know your background. I've talked with you about a few of your books. This is number 10 for you?
The number 10, yeah.
Yes, double
Number 10
digits.
published.
Congrats. There you go. Not counting, what do they call them? Desk drawer books.
Practice. I have 3 practice books.
There you go. There you go. That's what they're there for. So, yeah, we don't need to get too into your background other than you are suspense is your thing, thriller is your thing. It was when I knew you were when I was presented with the opportunity to read your book and interview you, I was really excited because I'm like, "Oh, I forgot how good he is at writing suspense." It was like it's nice to, like, come back to it
Yeah.
after so many of these where I don't know what I'm gonna get, but
Thank you.
I got excited.
You
I
hope you get
appreciate
better with
that.
every book, or at least you don't get worse,
Yeah.
but you don't have any context for it as a writer, like, you don't know to remember.
And you don't wanna lose the reader, you wanna respect the reader's time, it's a balancing act, you don't want to insult them, but you also don't wanna lose them, and
Yeah.
so it's you wanna write something that's complex enough, that's sophisticated enough, and that doesn't always mean more people, more names, more characters.
That's right, and what I've learned over time, and I don't sit down and think this purposefully when I'm writing, but what I have objectively looked back on over time is that readers of the thriller and suspense genre, they certainly are capable of reading very complex, huge character driven novels, but they really want that propulsive narrative drive that's just going to keep turning the pages. And again, that can be a very complex story. And I think my stories tend to be complex. So I think I balance that by not having too many characters there because it's all from one person's point of view. So how many you can't have 12 people and they're all seeing different things. So it lends itself to, I don't want to call it a smaller story, but certainly a smaller cast.
Yeah, and it takes place within less than a month,
Yeah.
right? Like, of just a few weeks, and then it's, like, dual timeline. So you because you're going back and forth, and so it's I imagine that it was yeah, it's tricky to keep in mind and keep your facts straight. I imagine maybe you had a wall of Post-it notes where you had to make sure you're talking about one point, but not revealing too much first until you've gotten to another point, and I just imagine that was, like, really tricky as well.
Yeah, you like to think so, but, the reality is it's a total shit show. Because I tend to write the last couple novels I've written, so the one that I haven't even shown my publisher yet, which only takes place over 5 hours. To talk
No.
about simplifying it, write about the first half of it, stream of consciousness, and then I'll go back and read it just to remember what I wrote, and then I write the second half, and then I go back and read it for the very first time without any notes having been written. So it's a hot mess. There's characters I've forgotten about, there's plot lines that need to be tied up. So that's when I start taking those notes and restructuring, and then I just so many edits between myself, feedback from my agent, multiple
Mhm.
editor.
I imagine they're used if you're working with the same people over multiple titles, they're used to it by now, hopefully.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very important to me. It's interesting because the first person who reads it is my partner, and she gives it a copy edit. So she gives me definitely feedback about her general feelings about it, but she doesn't go deep into it. But she gives me and it's very important to me that whatever I present to my agent is as clean as possible and really represents my absolute best effort at that point in time, knowing it's going to still probably change quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that last time how you said you're just a pantser, and that's just it's if it's not fixed, don't or it's not broken, don't fix it. That's your system that works for you. Because
Yeah,
which is really impressive to me because I know a lot of people outline, but that's they do what they know. They do it
right.
the method that they do it.
Yeah, I think it's important to learn as a writer to trust your instincts, which takes many books and many years to do because most writers are very self-conscious, very lacking in confidence, and I know I've been through all of that. And even just with this what I'm writing right now, I remember sitting down and I again vaguest notion of an idea and I'm like, "All right, I'm going to at least outline the first whatever 20% of the book." And I just literally sat there for 3 days for my writing session and didn't do shit. And I'm like, I just have to write. And I just started writing. I'm like, yeah, so because I'm pretty convinced for me, the outline's all there. I just
Sure.
can't access it until I'm physically writing. So I think it's all in my subconscious. And I just literally need the physical act of fingers on the keyboard for it to start to come out. Because to be honest, when I go to edit, I'm not changing major plot points. I'm just changing kind of inconsistencies. So I think it's there. It's just how my brain works.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I could totally see that.
Oh
It
yeah,
just it
sure.
reminds me of my best friend, she likes to read, but she doesn't wanna pay for a book if she doesn't think she doesn't know if she's gonna like it, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What about the library?" And there's wait lists for books that I'm actually interested in. And I told her, I was like, "I have a bunch." She knows what I do, and so I was like, "Here, let me give you some titles and see what you like." I gave her a bunch of different things, and one of them was The Father She Went to Find because I
Mm,
thought that was, like, fast-paced enough, and it was interesting, like, where she could, like 'cause she I found that she enjoys suspense, but she also enjoys, like, women's fiction, so I'm like, "Okay,
mhm,
I got some options for you here."
right.
And so I sent her that, and it was funny because, like, within the first few chapters, I was like, "So how are you liking it so far?" She's girl spends 1 day out in the real world and immediately fucks it up.
That's the point.
Yeah, yeah, so I loved it, she was like, "Yeah, it was like some of it was a little far-fetched, but it was really good." She was like I was like, "Suspension of disbelief, come on, that's what you gotta get in just assume this is likely to happen." Like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's interesting you bring that up because that's the perpetual struggle I think for the suspense writer is I'm constantly asking what would I do in this situation, but of course that answer wouldn't be anything interesting to read. So you have to take that as a grounding root so you can have some kind of connection to the reader and then explode it. And then you don't know, is this it's very important for me to have things be stretched but believable. This could happen.
Mm.
And but my perception of that might be different than somebody else's. So all you can do is get feedback. And if 60, 70% of the people be like, yep, totally, because I get other people say, "Yes, this feels exactly right." So you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, and that's the whole thing you gotta take with it's different strokes, right? So that you're gonna find your people that won't be into it, but then you're also gonna find people who are like, "No, this is awesome. I'm gonna add him to keep an eye out for his next work," and stuff like that. No, and I told her, I was like, "Yeah, I talked to him. He said he was a bit of a pantser." I had to look that up to see what that meant. I like to think that I have a pretty good judgment when it comes to recommending books, but yours and there was a couple other authors that I'm like, "You know what? I feel pretty confident about this depending on
Thank
what
you.
you're looking for." Yeah, no, absolutely. That's like going back to my earlier sentiment where I was like, I was excited to get to start this title because I was like, I know I you haven't disappointed me yet, so that's why I was like, I was excited to
Hang
get
around
to
long
it.
enough.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
I'll just so something that I thought was really interesting, I don't think you've done it before, is that you included like QR codes
No,
in the pages after certain scenes and you added a note. So it was like video footage of was this okay, was any part of this like true based on real events?
no.
Or it was just fabricated so the video footage was kinda, like, fabricated so it goes with the narrative.
And it was,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So Poe basically records her side of the conversation on her podcast, and her guests don't know that. And I don't even remember why I introduced that. I thought it would be something. It just made sense to me that because she agrees to delete the video footage, but it just seemed to make sense to me that she would surreptitiously do that as a safety precaution. So at least she has some kind of record, video record, even if it's not showing the guest. And then I was writing the scene. I'm like, I want to see what this looks like.
Mhm.
And I reached out to this actor who she had reached out to me a few years before. She was just a fan of my books. And as I thought about her, I'm like, I think she looks like how I envision Poe. So I reached out to her. I'm like, "Hey, can I hire you to do a few scenes?" And she's got an impressive IMDb page, but it was also I didn't think she would do it, but then she also it was also during the strike, so I'm like,
Mm.
"Hey, maybe you're not supposed to be doing this," but like,
Yeah.
um, little side project, and she did it and knocked it out of the park, and I'm like, "All right, I've got to use this." So I packaged it as recovered evidence, and I gave it to my editor, and I'm like, "Can we add this in?" She's like, "I've never seen this before. I've never done this before, but I think so." And it's crazy, like, I checked a couple days ago, and there's, like, almost 30,000 scans on those QR codes.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
it's fun to
crazy.
track it, and if you have a Bitly account, it can show you the country of origin, just I don't know, it's interesting just to see that
It
people
is.
are and they're just files sitting on my Google Drive,
Yeah.
But I love that. I like having multimedia in my books.
Yeah, so was that the first time you've ever done something like that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I have had fake websites built that if you went to this URL in this book, and I don't even call it out because it's in like an Easter egg. I've had artwork commissioned for my books that just is tied to the story that all of a sudden you see this picture that the character was seeing. Because that's I love that kind of stuff. I have no idea if anyone's going to like it or not, but it amuses me, and that's why I that's the kind of driving force behind it.
It's yeah, because that's when it adds a component and it's like a compliment, like, you could still enjoy the story if you never scan the QR code. It's just adds another layer to it,
So the
another way of
audiobook
absorbing it.
version, obviously, whoever's listening to that doesn't access that. So that's very
Yeah.
important to me that it's not necessary.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because 'cause I'm thinking, because yeah, when I switch between when I do reading versus listening, it's definitely a different, like, way of absorbing that information, the story. Because like, when you got especially good narrators are very important, good voice actors. I've straight up stopped reading a book because I couldn't stand the narrator. I couldn't stand how they were doing it, and I just couldn't do it, and
Right.
so when the voice actors are very good, they are delivering it in their way
Yeah.
versus however you're used to just reading it
Right.
across the page in your way. So I thought that was like a really cool thing to see your Poe in the video, like acting out those scenes. I read like straight the page and like shit, and then you watch it down, you get that vibe, you get that eerie feeling. You could see the discomfort on her, you could see the terror. Like you get
That's
so
great.
much more out of get so much more out of the character that way.
Yeah, and her name is Rebecca Kennedy, and I will say one thing I did struggle a little bit with was I don't for people who've read my books, I don't describe a lot of things. So I rarely describe my protagonist because again,
Sure,
she's
yeah.
all being told through her point of view, so she's never just describing herself. But I also just love the idea what you were alluding to with the audiobook narrator, own kind of voice in mind. I like the readers to have their own Poe. This is how
Mhm.
Poe looks like to me. I think that's important. So I'm like, all right, if I do this video, I'm saying this is what Poe looks like. But it was worth the risk for me because I think Rebecca was great and she does kind of look how I pictured it at least.
That's awesome. Yeah, that worked out really well. I think that was a good choice, and the fact that you've gotten so many, like, scans on it is do you think you ever would think about doing something like that in the future?
For sure. Yeah. It just all I think about, I never try to want to force anything. So I think about what I just wrote, for example, that my agent has right now. I don't have anything like that in there, but I do have because it all takes place over 5 hours in a house in a small town. I'm like, I want to see a map of the town. I want to see a layout of the house. So I commissioned that to be done so you could have that sense. So it just depends on if the book speaks to me that it would be well suited for that.
Yeah, yeah, I could see, like you have to be careful because you don't wanna throw it in there just because it's cool, and if it doesn't work, then it's just
Right.
like
I know, and it's weird. I always think if I accidentally delete that Google folder,
Yeah,
these books are just out there in the wild. I could throw any video in there that all of a sudden
yeah,
it's so
it's like
weird.
a little prank, like
Right. Get Rickroll people.
yeah, like a special edition out there.
Totally.
Oh god, that'd be so funny. I always like to ask about the research. What is it did you approach it the same way in your previous books? Was there anything because there's not just the dark material, but there's you have experience in podcasting, so I assume maybe you just explored different things on your own. But I want to like how did you approach it? Did you approach it the same way as your previous works? Did you find anything fascinating or surprising, stuff like that?
Yeah, pretty much the same as before. My approach to research is that I don't like it. It feels like homework to me. I have many friends who the reason they write is as an excuse to research. And I love that. To
Yeah.
me, it feels like a burden. But again, if you're writing kind of first person present tense from not necessarily an everyday person, but from a person who doesn't necessarily have a totally specialized job. There's not a lot you have to research. If my character turns the corner and someone's pointing a gun in her face, she's not going to immediately say, think to herself, the model of that gun. She's going to be like, there's a gun in
Yeah.
my face.
Yeah.
So for the podcast elements, I think about, okay, you're right. You and I both know what it takes on a minimum level to record these kinds of conversations. So I created my own streaming platform in the book. And then you just research what kind of board would they have and things like that. And then you realize like how much does this have to even be conveyed to the reader
Mm,
to be believable?
mm.
Would she be having these thoughts or does it feel just like forced exposition? So again, that's going back to me not describing a lot of things. So you're just writing along and you hit a part where you're like, so a good example is okay, you need to get rid of a body. What can a body fit in? And immediately I thought, I don't know, you think about these roadies with concerts and they have these big cases. And then all of a sudden I'm researching that and I'm like, tuba case. Tuba case could totally fit a body. So that comes from research. Like those are fun little journeys, but it's not like I spend hours doing research on something.
Yeah, I could see that kinda like where as it comes, you have to think about it and you're like, "Do I have to" what yeah, like, what's the appropriate level of information or context that you need to add in there? I
Yeah,
imagine you're yeah, looking like, Google your Google search history is probably a little
right.
questionable if you
Totally.
like
I think where you want to be really careful about research is when you're, again, my characters tend to be trauma inflicted. And if you don't have that background, that's where it becomes very disrespectful, right? If you're just like, oh, I assume they would feel like this. No, now you go victims and how does that present, especially if they were raised as a child or a teen. So you want to find websites, ideally non-clinical websites
Mm,
where you can actually read from their point of view. This is how I feel. That's gold because that's you're really tapping into kind of that human emotion. And you obviously don't want to steal what they're saying, but you read enough of those, you get a sense of, okay, I think I have a sense of what this might be like. Yeah. And then your copy editor. will rake you over the coals and find every
Yeah.
little thing and make sure, it's all accurate. And so again, going back to the taking a village, there's tremendous help with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I imagine I don't know how anybody could, like, write a book without because that makes me think about you you have a tendency, at least of the books that I've read in your point of view besides maybe one, find yourself writing from the point of view of a young or young female? Because I think I've only read one of your books where you have the main characters is a man, and so I was just,
Yeah,
like, curious because I imagine that's a bit of a challenge or maybe you're used to it by now because going off of that, I'll ramble on a little bit, but I when I first started reading, I hadn't read the summary yet. When I first started reading, I couldn't tell if Poe was a
totally.
man or woman. Poe is an androgynous, is like gender friendly, gender ambiguous name to me, and also just the way because she comes off like who wants it? And I'm like, and you're
Right,
not to say that women can't be no nonsense or rage filled, understandably, but I think it was just that neutrality where I just couldn't tell because
right.
it was like she was just like, "Dude, fuck you, like fuck this, fuck all this." So I guess you referring to like how you said earlier, how you have your partner read it, and then things with your editor and stuff. So I guess I imagine that helps you get a grip on the voice that would a woman really realistically do this? Yes or no?
Right.
Would she worry about this? Yes or no? And then the male authors that I speak with, they have people who tell them that a woman would never weigh herself after working out. That's just not they just or something like that. Not no woman who's of this caliber, like with your characters, it's out of place for her character. Some things like that where he's okay.
Interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I've written, yes, a number of books from a female single point of view. Again, first person present tense, so you were her. You were inhibiting her. And what I have found over time is just I try not to overthink it. I try not to think about what would a man do versus what would a woman do.
Sure, yeah.
Fraught situations, what would a human do? And it's funny you bring this all up because when I first started writing Tell Me What You Did, I knew 100% who Poe was, but her name is Dylan Poe Webb,
Mm,
Dylan. Like you said, very gender neutral. And that was a little purposeful. And because I don't know, I guess I was mentally almost pushing back a little bit, thinking, like, why does it matter? In a way. And I remember my agent told me when she read it, I didn't figure out Poe was a woman until 50 pages in.
yeah,
And I remember writing back to her, I'm like, does that matter? And
yeah,
she
yeah,
writes back, yes, it absolutely does. And it was my agent's a little bit older than me, and I don't want to call her old fashioned by any means, but to her, it was important. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. To me, it doesn't matter. This is just this
sure.
person who is in this situation. So yeah, so I don't know. I like that. But yeah, you're totally right. I get tremendous feedback from all the voices guiding and helping with my writing are female in my life. So I have no lack of and most of my readers. So I get great advice. And again, I try not to go into little like I would never write she worked out and weighed herself, not because I didn't think a woman would do that. I just wouldn't add that detail in there because it wouldn't be
Yeah.
important to me. I absolutely listen to any feedback that I get for that.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was important too, and it was also because talking about old fashioned, I guess I can, appreciate because it just doesn't I can see it where maybe it might matter because of the situation she's in.
Right.
Women perceive violence and stalking and assault on a different scale than men do,
100%.
especially when it's
And they're
opposite.
subject to it way more, obviously.
Yeah, and so what she's like but obviously we also understand from again, reading the summary that Poe is different. Like, she took matters into her own hands. She hunted this guy down. She made a plan. It was definitely premeditated, and she did what she did.
Right,
And so, not to say that's gender specific behavior at all, but it presence of mind and like her thought processes and her attitude definitely reflect that behavior where
right,
she's tough, she's no nonsense, she's gonna go for it, I think what I write in my notes, she's reckless, she's a brazen, she's not completely reckless, she's just fear doesn't she doesn't like She doesn't I'm not to say she doesn't feel fear, but she powers through. Like, it doesn't affect her. She's a fight or flight. She's the fight person.
Yeah, and I think
She literally walks into danger. Like, it
totally.
wa
And I think and I that's a really important point that you just made because that is super critical to me to establish a character who it could be perceived as reckless. I think you're totally right, but to me it's you're so broken that you almost don't care what happens to you and you're chasing this thing that you think is going to make you feel better. And maybe it does, but most likely it doesn't. But it's all that you know because you don't know how to heal. Her starting the podcast was a kind of inadvertent means of working through her trauma to talk to him. She feels comfortable talking to criminals. She wants to understand them. She wants to make sense of things. So I like the idea of reckless because you've stopped caring about yourself.
Yeah, which is a dangerous line to cross because she's definitely
100%.
got yeah. I mean, you could classify it, like, on a level she's got PTSD on some level. I think maybe
Totally.
she's just not
How
she
not?
took matter what's that?
How could you not in
Yeah,
her
oh, no, 100%. I think it's just like we all process it differently, but she didn't let it get her down, and I think I totally we haven't touched on it yet. I appreciated her dad in that sense where she it was kinda like we get from her that he's not the same, and he's not who he once was, and she's estranged from her dad, but things aren't the same between them, or he's not the same, and so I appreciated that once they reconnect and because it's hard for her. She has to, like, get everyone up to speed in order
get
for
him up
them
to
to
speed
know
on a
the
secret
gravity of the
she's been hiding
situation.
for years. So,
Yeah,
that's a
and
very
it's
hard thing to do.
to me, that was like, "Oh god," because 'cause she's gotta do it more than once, and then
Right,
she's gotta do it, like try not to be spoiler free, on a different scale, and it's like I think that I appreciated that because she was, like, in her little bubble in her network, she had very few people that she could trust and rely on, and it was, like, her dad and her partner, and then her dog, which I was like, I love yes, she's a dog person. But yeah, I just thought I appreciated the fact that once her dad came into the picture, he it was like that unconditional love. Like, he was ready to, "What? Are you serious?" But he was just ready to be in her corner
right.
again.
Again, because there are so few characters, those relationships are so critical because that's how you start to get a sense of who she is through how people are interacting with her. And I think when you have a father who just will unconditionally support her, that's telling about her, not just him. So that was important. That relationship was really important. And it's funny, her relationship with her boyfriend, when I first wrote the draft to give it to my editor, they weren't dating. He
Mm,
just worked for her. My editors, she didn't say, I want to see them together. She said, I want to see more of their relationship. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, oh, what if they're dating? That's
yeah.
interesting. And that's important too, because his ability to see that she is distant with him on a very subtle level speaks to their relationship. Like she
Oh, yeah.
knows she's hiding something, but he still loves her, but it's you can only take that for so long. And so she has decisions to make around that relationship as well.
Yeah, and I like that it's confronted earlier on where I felt for him. I'm hurt. Like, I'm falling for you, and you're not sharing everything with me, and he's thinking like, "Why? Is it me? Is this
Right.
something you holding
Right.
back because of me?" And it's, "No, it's nothing personal. She's holding
You
this
have no
back from
idea.
everybody." Absolutely, yeah. So it's just and then that's another thing where it was like we can appreciate, Kip's character where, of course, he's gonna have a hard time swallowing that truth, but
Right.
he's like, "Okay." It's like, unfortunately, he's dragged into the shit show now, and he's like
He's fully part of it.
yeah, yeah, exactly, and I know I liked their relationship, and I liked how it was approached because it just yeah, kinda you're saying, like, it adds to the depth of just her character and how readers understand her character, where she's because 'cause I'm just yeah, like, that secret because she like, I imagine that was, like, the hardest thing for her, one of the hardest things because she kept it for so long, and then she's gotta be truthful in order to because now she can't afford not to be truthful.
And I love the idea of that, like, you have to do this for the logic of it, but not even realizing at the time, it's like by doing that, by confessing, by saying what you did, that is the beginning of the healing process that you've been chasing the whole time. But now you're forced to do it and you realize, "Oh, there's some good that comes out of this, even if it blows up my world."
Oh, yeah, 100%. It's like yeah, it was gonna come I was gonna catch up to her sooner or later.
Totally.
Unfortunately, I guess I don't think she foresaw it coming in that manner. Coming in
Right.
that
And she does, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but she does confess it to this woman, Alice Hill, who runs this coffee shop. And I mean, and Alice is the main character from my fifth book, Mr. Tender's Girl. And then that was a big discussion with my editor, because I'm like, I wanted to write Alice because Alice is just the ultimate trauma survivor. And so she's a good person to talk to. But then, do we have this in here if people haven't read that book? So I had an author's note about it, but I loved having her in the book because first of all, it was just good to see her again because I hadn't written her
mm,
in almost 10 years. And just to see, oh, yeah, that this is totally what she would say. This is totally how she would counsel it. So that was really, it was emotional for me to write that.
aw, to revisit that character, and
Yeah.
because 'cause you've done it before. I remember this discussion where I read oh god, what was it? I read where it was The New Neighbor, and then that was in the same universe
It's the
as,
dead husband. Yeah.
yeah. So
Same
I thought
house.
that was really cool. Yeah. I thought it was really cool that you did it again where you're, like, in the same universe as one of your previous works, and I did Alice, even though I haven't read, Mr. Tender's Girl, now it's gonna be on my reading list
Yeah.
'cause that's what happened with The Dead Husband. I added
Right.
it after I read The New Neighbor, yeah. And then I think I talked to you about it before where I was like, because 'cause you're getting these, like, little tidbits, and in the moment where The New Neighbor where he's, like, seeing I don't know what you wanna call it, like, a vision of talking to the main character from Dead Husband,
Right.
and this just the things that she says are so ominous, and you don't like, she says so much, but not that much, like,
Right.
the short
Right.
time that
That
they're,
was a
like, talking.
balancing act.
Yes. Oh, I imagine. And then when I remember when I read The Dead Husband, I was like, "Oh my god," because I was recalling the dialogue, and I was like, "Oh my god."
Oh,
Like,
that's
it's
great.
just yeah, because something about I'm not gonna talk about my son, and then
Right.
learning what happened, and I'm like, "Oh, shit, of course she's not gonna talk about him." Just absolutely not. Like, that was out, especially because I have 2 small boys, so I'm
Right.
like, we're seeing that on a different level and
Right.
just being like yeah, so I imagine I thought that was so cool how you did, like, another thing. It wasn't just because, like, you just or you missed the characters, and you're, "No, this is gonna fit in, and my new character needs that
It
character,"
has
type
to fit in, yeah.
yeah.
There are a lot of Easter eggs in my books that nobody is ever going to notice. Somebody will be wearing a sweatshirt from this college that appeared in my 3rd book, the
Yeah.
fictitious college, and it's just a mention, so you will never that just entertains me, but, like, for the bigger stuff, it 100% has to serve the story, and so it's usually a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, no, I did Alice as a character. What's the time difference? Like, how much time has passed in that story world? Like,
Nope.
the past for Alice?
Yeah, I mean, they were both present day, so probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay, okay.
So,
Yeah, because I thought it was yeah, I thought it was Alice, she didn't appear a whole lot, but she made such a big impact that she helped Poe figure out her next steps and just be more sure of herself and the decisions, following her gut instinct and all that. So
yeah, and her story is batshit crazy, so it's well worth going back to seeing that book. That's the book where I found my voice, I'm convinced, and, you know, that's one of the creepiest books I've ever written.
yeah, real that's saying a lot 'cause I would say this one's maybe not it's less creepy, but more, like, dark. It was, like,
Yeah,
serious. I
yeah.
was like and even some of the dialogue I that our creepy podcast guest was saying, I was just like, "Jesus Christ, Carter." I was like
Totally.
I was just, like, thinking, "Dang, okay, he's taking it up a notch," but it's cool to see, especially if I've talked to the author a few times to see, like, that growth and that, "Okay, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? What" and
Uh,
then reading something new. It's really because I imagine you as an author, you have to step up your game, you have to challenge yourself and all that.
you never even know what that even means, right? So, for example, this book has sold more copies in its first month than any other book I have written in its lifetime.
Congrats, that's
No,
amazing.
thank you, and I say that simply from the perspective of I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I have no idea if what was so attractive about this book. A lot of it's word of mouth and stuff like that, but so when you think about stepping up your game, I'm like, I don't even know what that means because then you'll write something and then the editor will be like, "Oh, I don't really like this as much." And it's, "Oh, I thought it was better." You have no idea. So I just fall back on, "Hey, write the story that's resonating with you. Write it from a place of joy, from this is the
Mhm.
story I want to tell, and be excited about it because that will propel your writing." And then just assume that you're getting better all the time simply through the act of writing. You never know. And I know, for example, it's really hard to follow up a book like this with something that's going to be equally as attractive to the general public. And who knows? I hear that story all the time, as you do as well. People have these big breakouts, and then the next book doesn't do as well. As almost seems inevitable, even though the writing might be better. Who knows? So I
Yeah,
have
it's
to,
kind yeah, you think that, but I think that's, like, almost in a lot of industries, like, public-facing industries where it's like people are keeping an eye on you now, like, the bar is that much higher because like, now the expectations, it's like, how do you keep raising that bar? How do you keep not even just raising, but just meeting that bar with your next thing that you're doing, that you're releasing out into the world?
right, and you hope that I think it's key to just have decent output where people can then go back and look at some of the other stuff, and because I know I'm the same way. So Stephen King comes out with something, I'll read anything he puts out. That doesn't
Yeah,
mean I like all of it. Some of it's
yeah,
way better than others, and some it just how it hits me. That's just and you hope that the readers just come to accept. Yeah, what you don't want is you don't want it to be like bad writing. So I feel confident I'm past that stage, and if you write poorly, it's not even gonna get sold to a publisher.
yeah.
So it is about, does this plot resonate? And if not, why? And can we fix it? And if not, then just, okay, this is just what I wanted to write at the time, and hopefully it's something that people wanna read.
Yeah, and I think that's really important that even if, the masses aren't gonna really get it, I think it's important for you. Even if you feel like you need to get it out, like you need to tell this story, even if it like stays in your little pocket, your own little bubble of your office or your desk, like for until you want to come back to it. I just feel like that's really therapeutic in a way. And it's really important for okay, until my next work, I can't let this go. Otherwise, I'm not gonna get past it. Like you have
Totally.
to.
And I always preach, don't think about the market, but at some point you have to. So a good example is if I do something, I write something, I give it to my agent, and I love the book. And then it's if her reflection is it's propulsive, it's great. However, it left me feeling very down or it's just very sad. And if I then I'll think, okay, that wasn't really my intention. Now I have to think, do you represent the market? Is everyone
Sure.
going to think this? And then usually it's I've been distant enough from it at that point where I can step back and be like, oh yeah, totally. I see that now. Let's lighten it up a little bit. So I think that your first best effort has to be just your gut. And then you start listening to advice, but very few people should be giving you advice because you can't listen to everybody because you'll have a terrible
Mm-mm.
book. So
Oh.
for me, it's two or three people, and that's it. I don't even workshop my books or anything like that. I don't show anyone anything until it's completely done.
Yeah, again, that's like going back to your do what works for you because
Right.
you don't wanna try something different and then you're like, "Ah, never mind, this sucks." Like, you just gotta go back to your other method. No, that's yeah, like, that's really smart where you have to yeah, you have to have just a healthy outlook on it too. You just have to
Totally.
be willing to accept that.
It's look, writing is so hard that if you're not finding the joy in the process, then I can't imagine why you would do it otherwise. And so if I sat there with every chapter and thought about people really like this, people really like that, even though it's not really what speaks to me, I wouldn't get anything done. You just have to trust your instincts, and your instincts aren't always right. That's part of the journey.
Yeah, that's why you have your team, but I think it's also important to keep it a close-knit team because there's author spaces and there's reader spaces, and
Right.
so once that line becomes fuzzy, then yeah, you're approaching potentially toxic territory.
100%.
The readers, they have strong opinions, they
Yeah,
like and the internet lets everyone share their opinions, and so it could be a lot, it could be overwhelming, it's a saturated market, and it could also be like one if someone's a little bit too loud in a negative way, then
Right.
unfortunately it's like,
Yeah, with my early books, I would read every review, mostly because there
it's
weren't that
what you're
many of
not
them.
supposed to do.
Well, yeah, I'm of mixed mind because I do think you are ultimately putting out a product to the world,
Yeah.
and if everybody on Goodreads hates the ending, you can't change the ending, but that's information, and it might inform you as you move forward. These days, I don't look at the reviews. I like to see how many I have because that's an indication of how a book's selling. I
Sure.
like to see the general score. It's just a data guy. It's interesting to me, but I don't
Mhm.
dig down into them. I like the very early reviews, like 4 months before it's released, the early Goodreads readers. Certainly, trade reviews I'll read. You can't not read those because they get emailed to you. um, but after a while, you're like, okay, yeah, this is going to be a 4.1 on Amazon and a 3.8 on Goodreads. And that's good. I'm happy with that. That probably now won't change a whole lot, but I don't go in and read the individual ones because it's just,
Yeah.
you
You'd
either
fall
get the
down.
endorphin rush or you get depressed.
Yeah. I was gonna say you fall down one of those spirals,
Right.
and it's not they neither one of those can be helpful, I imagine, or as
Yeah.
helpful as you think it might be. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Challenging. There's no scene that's difficult to write. What's difficult is when you're writing something and you're just like, this feels like filler.
Mm.
This feels like I don't know what I'm doing, which is usually the case. But it feels where there's scenes where you're like, I can't wait to write what I think is going to happen after this.
Oh, yeah.
And so I always question, then what are you writing now? Does it need to be written? So when that, and that usually happens around halfway through the book, you're just like, I guess she's going to, what if she goes to get a coffee? That stuff is tough to write. I love any kind of high suspense scene to write. When I get to those scenes where I know, oh, he's in her house, that kind of a scene, or the kid is missing and they're looking for the kid. There was a scene in this book where her dog runs off into the woods. And that just occurred to me at that second. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, they're at this Airbnb. The dog's got to go to the bathroom at some point, which you have to make sure to keep track of the dog. So she lets the dog out. And then I'm like, what if the dog just runs out into the woods? And then I'm like, all right, blazing through that scene. And I knew the dog was going to be fine, but the paranoia. So whenever there's heightened paranoia, I'm good at that. And I love writing that. So when you're excited about writing a scene, it's usually a scene that's going to be pretty good, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like that's why partially, like, as if it's good storytelling, if it's written really well, suspense, like, it'll turn pages, like, no matter what. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm a sucker for suspense and thriller for the most part, where I'm like there's, like, a few like, I read all types of genres just for the nature of what this thing is, but I get especially excited about suspense and some fantasy. Memoirs, it depends. Yeah, yeah, it's actually absolutely and even how kind you alluded to earlier, it's what you wanna write, what you enjoy writing, what you enjoy reading.
Right.
Otherwise, if you try something that you don't even care about, it's gonna show. And
Although I will say I mostly read nonfiction.
okay. 'Cause,
But
like,
yeah,
when you somewhere down the line, you'll write a memoir and it'll be
it'll be fast-paced and then this happened.
like a movie. So, I also always ask this question, what I guess it's hard to be try to be spoiler free as best you can. What advice do you have for Poe?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't think I've actually been asked that one. Advice for Poe. I feel like Poe is the one who could be giving me advice. I'm a big believer in, and maybe this is a subconscious thing that I write about with because it presents itself in a lot of my books, like I alluded to earlier. Broken characters who need to heal. And a lot of that healing is by letting go and just the sense of you can control what you can't control, that whole thing. And a lot of my characters are trying to control too much and they think they've got it. If I just do this, and usually the answer is just letting it go and seeking the solution inside instead of externally. But usually they're forced through things by external parties. So that would be it for Poe. Let go to
Yeah.
the best of your ability. Let go, move on, seek peace within.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a solid advice, especially for someone in her situation, is
Right,
because it goes back to saying, like, because she took control. Like, after that after this whole that's how she handled her like,
right.
her trauma. is she took control and she thought that was gonna be the solution, that everything like, she was gonna right the wrong in the world as best as she could in her ability, but then that was like a catalyst to that was the starting event where years later it would the things arguably what's happening to her now would not have happened had she not taken those measures ago.
And and I enjoyed writing the part about she's justifying it to herself, saying, "Well, if I don't get rid of this person, he's gonna hurt somebody else." So moving away from, "Oh, this is just revenge," and then the justification of, "I could go to the cops. It's been so long. They're never gonna be able to all these excuses when the reality of it is she wants to inflict pain, and she's not letting go. Even though she's totally right as well, like, he could be hurting other people. So it's that balance, but how much do you control yourself? It's just I love that kind of I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, like that internal conflict where
Right.
you're just and then,
Totally.
yeah, like you said, like, she's justifying it, and she's like, "How do I make this out so that I'm not necessarily doing the wrong thing?"
Right. Totally.
Yeah. It's yeah, a lot of layers, a lot of complications, a lot of implications there to the type of person she is. So I'm like, I can't even put my foot in the door of what I would do in that situation. Luckily, I'm feel very lucky that I have no idea what that would be like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like um, what is next for you that you can talk about?
I usually just sell one book at a time, so my publisher never knows what I'm
Mhm.
working on, when it's gonna be turned in, but my goal is to usually write about a book a year. I will say that I did co-write a very dark YA thriller with a buddy of mine, so we're in the stages of figuring out what to do with it because now all of a sudden you're dealing with my agent, my editor don't deal in the YA space. So
Okay.
you're almost starting all over again. I have another standalone thriller, the one that takes place in a small, tiny, remote mountain town in the course of 5 hours that I've given to my agent. I'm working on her notes, and then we will submit it as option material to my editor probably within the next month or so. And fingers crossed that they'll pick it up, but you never know.
Yeah, you gotta you yeah, you just have to remain optimistic even though, like, you've had multiple successful titles up until now. It's kinda like it's yeah, I imagine you're like, "Oh, is this still" okay, like, starting all over again a little bit, like
Yeah, I will say the one that we're gonna be giving as an option is it is just page turning suspense. It's propulsive. It's totally different from Tell Me What You Did, and it might resonate differently either for better or for worse, but I know that it falls squarely in the propulsive thriller category, so I'm pretty confident about that at least.
nice. Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye out for it because 'cause I'm like I said before, it's like anything you write, I'm expecting it to I'm expecting to enjoy it.
I appreciate that.
Oh, of course. Carter Wilson, Tell Me What You Did. That book is available now. Thank you so much for joining me again. Real quick, where can we find you online and on social media?
Yep, carterwilson.com. And I also have a company, unboundwriter.com, where I do coaching, writing retreats, online classes, that kind of a stuff. And the social media is everything's at Carter Wilson Author.
Perfect. I recommend this to everybody who likes suspense, who isn't afraid to get a little dark and question maybe their own sense of morality, all that
Nice.
good stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, and then feel free to keep in touch. You can come back for a fourth, fifth, sixth time. Love to chat again.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me on, Megan. I really appreciate it. Good to talk to you again.
And there you go. That was Carter Wilson talking about his latest book, Tell Me What You Did. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where to find him online and on social media. Rate, review, subscribe while you're searching online for your favorite authors. Find Cantina Book Club. Give me and a subscribe and a follow, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.